Are we ready to go? Okay. So welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. I mean, the weather is not cooperating with us, but we are happy that you join us. This is the new event of our series of geopolitical debate that we have started a few months ago. And today we are discussing something that apparently is probably the more technical debate that we're going to have in this series, but probably it's the more political that we are having here. So let me introduce our speaker before starting with the conversation. Here in person we have Cesare Alemanni. Cesare is a journalist and an author. He has recently published a book called Il Re Invisibile. The Invisible King, which is focused on semiconductors and microchip. What is more interesting is that he moved to this topic starting from logistics. His previous book was about globalization and logistics, and that was the natural follow-up, and that's a very interesting approach to the topic. And then we have from remote, okay, here we are. So we have Alessia Mighini, who was supposed to be with us, but she had a personal issue and she's joining from home, so we thank her particularly. Alessia is a professor at Università di Studi Piemonte Orientale, but also a research fellow at Bruegel and at ISPI. But she's here because in her capacity, mainly with Bruegel, she's studying how China has evolved in terms of technology policy and investment also in the semiconductor industry. Then we have Sanne van der Lugt. She's a researcher and a consultant, and she's an expert of ASML, the most important European company that is based in the Netherlands, and she has published a column, a commentary on our website, on the website of the Institute for European Policy Making, and she will explain us the geopolitical role of ASML and the implication of what the US has been doing to curb the export of geopolitically relevant semiconductors technologies to China. Then we have Roberto Baldoni, that he will help us to understand something that is super important, which is the connection between the hardware, the semiconductor, and the cybersecurity issues. Because he was the first, how to call it in English, the cybersecurity czar that we had in Italy, the director of the National Agency for Cybersecurity, and he's a scholar on these topics. So he will, he had a unique opportunity to understand the connection between the intelligence community, the national security community, and the the tech community. So I thank you all for being here with us. And I want to start with something that we discussed in our email conversation here at the app a few days ago, and Daniel Gross, who joined us, maybe he can comment on this after when we open discussion to Q&A. A few days ago, Intel canceled, or maybe not formally canceled, but postponed for at least 2 years a big investment in Germany that was supposed to create a big plant to build, to assemble. I don't know exactly what they were supposed to do with semiconductors in Magdeburg. The investment was supposed to cost 30 billion euros, and at least 10 billion euros were subsidies from Germany. Now Intel has many issues because they basically missed the opportunity to invest in AI when other companies did, and they are losing the competition with NVIDIA and other companies and OpenAI. So they have to rethink their strategy, and this creates an opportunity, or at least a dilemma, for the German government, because they have to decide whether they want to move the subsidies to other industries or other companies, or to fix their budget issues. This is part of a global race to subsidies, to subsidize semiconductors. If you read the second part of the Draghi report, the 328 pages part, there is a whole chapter focused on semiconductors, and the main question is how Europe how Europe can develop something that is close to a strategic autonomy, what Europe is supposed to do to be more independent or at least more resilient in terms of semiconductor supply chain. The answer is not obvious, and maybe we will discuss this. But I mean, I know that if you're here, you're probably interested in semiconductors, but not everybody is an expert. That's why I would like to ask to Cesare why semiconductors are so relevant. I mean, he has developed a specific skill in how to say, explain the semiconductor industry to general audience. So let's start from here.
Okay, thanks for the invitation. Simply put, semiconductors are so important, so crucial. The reason why everyone is like trying to build these fabs, like Germany is trying to do with Intel, is because semiconductors are everywhere. They are the main and crucial components of every technology that is based on computation and information, which doesn't mean not just like laptops or smartphones, the obvious ones. Today's these kind of like components are inside like all kind of like electronic devices, electronic components. They are inside data center where we train AI model. They are more and more inside vehicles. They are crucial part in the transition of vehicles of the automotive industry towards like a more sustainable approach. And they are also crucial, as I was saying, in the AI race, because like today the processor with which we train AI models are mainly based on this technology, and they are mainly designed by NVIDIA. The reason why there is a kind of quote-unquote war around semiconductors has also to do with the shape of the industry itself. The semiconductor industry is a very specific type of like industry in which like we clearly can see how globalized and how the forces of globalization shaped it along the years. Because back in late 70s, early 80s was actually one of the first big industry to globalize and in like to divorce or to divide between industries and brands or like factories that like were more specialized in design and processes and factories or like azienda. Do you say azienda? Firms, exactly, sorry. Okay. Firms that are like more specialized in manufacturing, which are called foundries. This division, as I was saying, started in the 80s and then like accelerated in the 90s, and today is like full on display. And it's the reason why today we have like the big names and the choke points in the semiconductors value chains are associated with names that are like now common knowledge, especially NVIDIA, as I was saying, in the term of like as a fabless that like is very keen on designing these advanced chip GPUs, with which we train AI. And on the other side, also geographically, because as I was saying, like the design and evolution R&D part, the fabless model is more present or relevant and advanced in the Western countries, especially in the US, but also a bit in the UK with IP core firms that are very strong in the UK. And there is also, like the manufacturing part where actually the chips are physically produced and manufactured and assembled, it's mainly based in the Indo-Pacific region, especially in two focal points. Actually one, I will say, like Taiwan with a firm that is called TSMC, which is now very, very famous, very discussed, because it's one of the reasons why the tension around Taiwan is so heightened. And also one of the reasons why Taiwanese are very fond of these firms, because like they consider it sort of like a silicon shield, or kind of like a guarantee that like the world will not forget about the Taiwanese cause the Chinese should try to attack the island. So there, as I was saying, there is like this, the industry today is very globalized, is characterized by a few choke points. It was, in terms of the design, it's like mainly based in the US. In terms of manufacturing, Taiwan is also bit in South Korea with places like Samsung. And also, but there's also other parts of the process because the whole value chain is very spread and big. Like, for example, there are like the fabrication of wafer, which is like the substrate, like the material with which the chips are made, which is silicon, is mainly done or like greatly done in Japan, for example. So it's a supply chain, a value chain that is very spread and has like a very few very crucial and strategic choke points. One of which is, and we're gonna definitely talk about it, is here in Europe, and this has to do with machines that kind of like print, as a quote-unquote print, transistor, and it's a firm called SML, it's a Dutch firm. And all this value chain has recently kind of weaponized and get in the middle between like the crossfire of like the China-US tensions and China-US escalation of tensions around especially microchips. The reason why is exactly because like microchips are like so crucial in everything, and one of those things is also dual use of this technology in terms of like it has to do with cybersecurity and also with like the future of warfare, because autonomous warfare is more and more a reality, and microchips are also crucial for that. So the one who is going to control the microchips in the future is going to also have like a huge military advantage. And so no big power, no superpower especially want to lose on this kind of like front.
Okay, thank you so much, Cesare, for this introductory explanation of how this complex industry works. You mentioned China a few times, and that's where I would like to ask to Alessia to join the conversation, because the US and the EU as well are particularly worried about what China want to do with the semiconductor industry for two main reasons, probably three. The first one is the obvious one. If the most significant part of the value chain is in Taiwan, this is something that can protect Taiwan from an aggression from China, but is also something that makes the whole value chain extremely vulnerable, extremely fragile, because Taiwan is always exposed to China military ambitions. The second problem is that will China catch up in terms of technology with the US in terms of design, or with Taiwan in terms of assembly, or with the EU in terms of technologies? This is something that China has heavily tried to do in the last decade. And I read, I don't know if the number is correct, but they invested $150 billion in terms of subsidies to try and fail to catch up. And the third reason, that's something that is coming out in the debate, that since they cannot get to the frontier in terms of technology, they will probably focus on legacy, so-called legacy chip, which means chips used not for the AI, for other normal and traditional products, and they will probably invade global markets as they did with solar, like with the solar panel, for example. So where does China stand in this moment? What do you think? I mean, you have this particularly project focused on monitoring Chinese economic data. So what's your feeling? You are muted, or we cannot hear you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Thanks, Stefano, for the great introduction. As usual, you know much more than expected by non-specialists. So thanks a lot. You actually spoiled a number of points that I wanted to make. But thanks, because I can go further. So I would start from this basic fact that we all know, which is the idea that China is competitive in semiconductors. Also in the Draghi report, we can read, between the lines that, there's a fear, a lot of concerns about China, increasing capacity, knowledge, know-how in chip making. I'm not an engineer, simple economist, and the sector is very complex. So what we did is to go on the field and interview firms around, mainly Asia, and from, well, I can tell because it's no secret, from Malaysian firms, we got a lot of insight because they themselves are investing and studying the sector as Malaysian, government usually did over the years, and they are trying to understand where to position themselves in the sector. Because the sector is very complex. I know that this means nothing, but this very sector, the ecosystem, the innovation system, if you want to call it, is really born global. So if we were to mention a sector that is very global since its birth, this is the chip sector. And if you read the book by Chris Miller, Chip War, that's a masterpiece in history of this industry. Very, very must read. The summary, very short summary, is that the sector is a complex value chain, but you have three major, say, stages: design, production, and what it's called assembly, testing, and packing, I think. But I may be wrong in the terminology. Bear on me, I'm not an engineer. And there are many different types of chips. And although we call them chips all together, they are very different animals, because memory chips are kind of easy to get and to produce, but logic chips are not. So if you are good at memory chips, doesn't mean anything for the capacity, knowledge, know-how, and ambition to get and achieve a complete capacity in the sector. And this is more or less where China is today. So a lot of production volume, so the mid stage, not a lot of design. Well, not the high tech one. The assembly and testing, neither. So together with the second China, which is Taiwan, they, of course, may go much further than where the People's Republic of China is today. But of course, there are two different countries, and apparently in Taipei, they're not very happy to be together. But this is another issue. Industry-wise, what we can see today is not a lot of investment in R&D by China, some less than 50% compared to the US level, if I'm not wrong. So they are investing a lot, of course. The amounts are most, but still a long way to go. And the bits and pieces of everything are not there. Which means that to achieve a complete closed loop sector, to be independent, is almost impossible. So one way out, and this from example from Malaysian firms, they are very clear about it. Let's not go into logic chip, because that's a no nonsense business for mid-level, countries, technology-wise. Let's try to get the memory chip market, which is more accessible, and then you can have a lot of volume and a lot of market share. China wants to take it all, but more in words than in facts. So maybe we should in Europe, for example, because in the US they are much clearer than we in Europe about this. We kind of on a defensive side. We think we have lost somehow already, but it's not true. China makes grand statement, oh, we want to have, an independent value chain and we will get it, but it's a long way to go. So this is where we are now, and maybe makes it a little bit more worrisome, the geopolitical side of it or consequence, which is the idea of getting Taiwan on board. Because with Taiwan on board, well, that's much easier to complete the value chain. So that's the easy way. Get Taiwan on board so that we have the parts of the value chain that we cannot reach by ourselves, which makes the geopolitical, story, much less political than, what really would mean in terms of technology and technological race with the US. So the narrative about getting Taiwan because of the reunification of China, blah, blah, actually covers something much bigger. And I mean, the nutshell of the overall political internationally race between US and China. Because in terms of investment, R&D, whatever you call it, they will never make it, because 2, 4, 5 years lags in terms of time to get to the technological frontier means ages in the sector, and they know very well. So this is a kind of a summary of where China stands today. So I leave it to you. So maybe we get back to some of the points when the other speakers will tell their points of view.
Being so clear, and I would ask the same effort to Sanne van der Lugt, because I know that when we discuss ASML, the most difficult part is to explain why ASML is so relevant and what does exactly ASML does. I mean, I know that is challenging and will probably request half an hour, but you will do this in 30 seconds. And then if you can explain us in which sense, if we look at what is happening to ASML, we can, understand the challenge of Europe that is squeezed between the geopolitical fears of the US and the geopolitical ambitions of China, and what is happening to ASML and what lesson we can get from what happened to ASML in terms of a European strategy to deal with the semiconductor industry and its relevance. You are muted, or we cannot, or probably we need to. Okay, now we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay,
good. Thank you very much for this question and the challenge, as you rightfully said. So during the introduction, the CHIPS Act was mentioned. And the idea behind that is to strengthen Europe's competitiveness and the tech sovereignty of Europe. But the only way we can do that is if EU member states have a really good understanding of what the competitive position is of their own national semiconductor industries. And that's where what I actually noticed a lack when it is about ASML. It has really not been the case yet. And for that, I also have to give a short technological explanation. And that is that to make chips, you need to make 3 steps. And also I'm going to explain this much more simple than it actually is, but it's easier this way. So first it's called, the first step is called deposition. That is a step in which many layers of silicon and other materials are put together in very small sizes and needs to be done as precisely as possible. Then the next step is lithography. And that is like baking in a pattern on this material. That is where ASML is the best in the world. And then you have the third step, and that is etching. And that is basically scratching away the parts of the material that you don't need. And to make the most advanced chips, you need the most advanced, or let's say it the other way around. If you have the most advanced lithography, you can make the most advanced chips the easiest way because you don't need to scratch away so much of the material. But if you don't have the very advanced lithography machines, you can still make very advanced chips by using very advanced etching technology. And by just repeating these 3 steps many times, it will take you much longer, but you can still make very advanced chips. And this is where the story of ASML and the export measures of the US come in. Because in 2018, the US government decided that China should not get access to the most advanced lithography technology. And the only company in the world that is producing this is ASML. And the explanation behind it was national security, like we heard before in the introduction as well, that the dual use of chips. Chips can be used to make beautiful things, but they can also put in weapons. So if you have the most advanced chips, you can make the most advanced weapons. The US and China are in a power struggle. You don't want your enemy to have the most advanced chips to build the most advanced weapons. The Dutch government agreed back then, but the US started pushing for also no longer exporting DUV, which is less advanced. And the Dutch government said, no, because you can't produce the most, you cannot produce the most advanced chips with this. But the US government kept pushing. And at some point, the Dutch government said, okay, only for the most advanced DUV machines, we will also say that it's quite advanced still. So we also say we don't export it anymore. And that was June 2023. But what happened in October 2022, the US government made export measures, and they said, and it was only, it was for many different technologies, but not etching technology. Etching technology is the technology where US companies are the most advanced in. So while they were pushing the Dutch government to no longer sell lithography, they still allowed US companies to sell etching technology to China. And then in August last year, Huawei presented their new phones. There were highly advanced chips in it. And then the US government pointed out, said, you see, these chips were made with less advanced DUV machines. So that means that you should also no longer export these DUV machines. What they did not say is that later they actually already knew, but later, only half a year later, Bloomberg reported that these chips could be made with these less advanced DUV machines because they used the most advanced etching technologies that they could still buy from China. And why this is important is because Europe is lagging behind in many of the strategic technologies of the future. But this lithography technology that ASML has is the one technology that the whole world needs. So it's a good leverage that Europe has. But in order to keep that leverage, ASML needs to be able to sell its products so that it can earn money, so that it can put that money into innovation. And the DUV machines that the US now does no longer want ASML to send to China, that was their cash cow. That is the machines that they earn most money with. And what I've been seeing in these negotiations is that the EU European member states, the politicians, they didn't realize how important this leverage is for Europe. Because when our Dutch ministers tried to get support within Europe, they said, when they realized that the US was after ASML, that was around the same time that the US had the Inflation Reduction Act. And a few member states were thinking, okay, we have a car industry that we would like to save. We could perhaps trade ASML for saving our car industry, not realizing that this is really, call it our bargaining chip, to stay in the same theme, that we should cherish. And I'm not saying this because I'm Dutch. I've been saying this the same about Ericsson when we had the whole 5G discussion and the US tried to buy Ericsson. This is really an asset that we need to keep close to us. So this is short. I could talk for days about this, but I think I should stop here to have time for questions.
Thank you, Sanne. You were very effective in explaining what ASML does. I mean, this conversation is always difficult because we are discussing about products that are measured in nanometers, not even in millimeters. So we are not literally able to think how small they are. So it's kind of a theoretical idea more than a hardware issue. But we need to discuss about their hardware nature with Roberto Baldoni, because I mean, a few years ago we were used to have this kind of conversation about Huawei smartphone and technologies. It was like real hardware, and in that case it was very clear that there was some kind of intersection between the race for a technology and the cybersecurity part, because there was the so-called backdoors in Huawei softwares. So we knew that there was the risk, which was not probably only a risk, that if the Chinese won the race for a global smartphone, probably there was a security threat. In case of, I mean, when we move to semiconductors and to chip, it's more difficult to imagine why they are relevant for cybersecurity. What is your assessment of this complex industry, and are you worried that if China invades the market with its legacy chip in our car or in our washing machines, we have a security problem, or is just on AI if they use their chip to train AI? What do you think?
So good afternoon to everybody. This is a very good question, actually. But let me say something about what I heard so far. So actually, all the talks that have been said till now, they look at three basic aspects, which is geopolitics, economy, and technology. And this is actually what is happening in the last 20 years. So you have the crossing of these three components, and this has made much more difficult from the globalization that created all this incredible supply chain. And so it's very difficult and very complicated to understand when you do something, when you issue a local, let's say, law in a specific country, what's happened in others. So this is why it's very, very difficult to realize what to do. But let me also add that for Europe, it's even more difficult for the fragmentation that we have. If you look at other countries like US, China, Russia, they have specific institutions that are able to mix these three components in order to react quickly to some exogenous input that happen. That could be either, a breakthrough in science, like it was ChatGPT a few years ago, or some other law that is issued in other country, or a ban, or a subside and then you are able to, within these, which are called National Security Council, you are able to react quickly and to understand and to give an answer to what San said also before. So what we do, I mean, we have a very important technology in Europe, and let me also say that this technology is very hard to replicate. I remember a lot of discussion when I was also Deputy Director General at DIS, where I try to explain to people, look, hardware is not software. Hardware is done by the legacy, all the background that you have, the industry legacy that you have constructed, that is not transferable, let's say, very easily into another country. It's also not very easy to delocalize. So that's why this is something that we should leverage, as San said. But why we cannot do it? Because that is a matter of national security at the end of the day. But national security is out of the European Union Treaty, Article 4, and this makes a big mess everything Europe. So how we can handle things that are not only economy, again, but they are in the realm of geopolitics, which means national security. And so from this point of view, we don't have any, I can say, institution at the European level that is able to handle these things. Of course, the Dutch government does that. It's in its power, but it is clear that the Dutch government could not have the same, let's say, weight of the European Union. So this is why it's very difficult to talk about the digital things in general, because you know, the digital and national security is so connected right now that you can really talk about one without impacting on the other. Look what's happened recently in Lebanon with the supply chain compromission, or what's happened every day with the cyber attack. So it's really something that we should try to talk very honestly and clearly in the European Union, and understanding if some of the power that are now on the end of the member states have to be passed to the central, to Brussels. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult to give an answer. I have a very simple example of how Europe reacts slowly and badly sometimes to things that happen in the scientific sector. If you look at the AI Act, I remember I was the guy that for Italy started negotiating this act in 2018. Then we had 6 years to get through 2024, and then it will be fully effective in 2026. This in science and technology is an enormous amount of time, and actually in 2022 we had the advent of ChatGPT that changed completely the risk landscape in AI. So and now we are with okay, the first regulation of AI, but we don't know if what has been written there can actually mitigate and be helpful to manage the risk. And this is also true for microchip. So from this perspective, I want also to add another thing that San said and underline it. If someone asks me who did the bad hit to Europe between Trump, the first presidency of Trump, and Biden, I have no doubt about that. It's Biden with IRA, because actually that is an instrument that also attack our innovation, which is already poor inside the US industry, the European industries. And we risk to, at least, maybe the small, medium enterprise to delocalize there, forgetting the state aid from the government. And of course, with that, there could be few industries also from the microchip sector. So that's why we are really, we are living in a world that is not like the one in which the Europe was taught, and we need to reason deeply on how to change the things. Otherwise, the distance between Europe and China and the US will be so huge that we will miss a lot of our strategic autonomy, because we really need to invest on innovation here. And if I look at the AI Act, for example, right now, and I am a young startupper, so I don't think that I will have enough money to give to a law firm in order to give me the advice if what I'm doing on LLM is good, is compliant or not to AI. So what I do, I go to Fiumicino Airport, I take the first flight, and I move abroad. So and this, of course, also touch the microchip sector. I want just to say that, and to acknowledge that the last commission with Thierry Breton did something on the CHIPS Act, because the CHIPS Act is the first directive or regulation, so I don't know exactly what it is, but that is able to fund with state aid first of a kind infrastructure. And we used this in Italy with the Draghi government to fund a few chip manufacturer in Sicily. The same did France. The same, as you mentioned, the Intel expected investment in Germany. They also accepted the state aid in the Saxon region for chip manufacturing. So this is a big jump with respect to the past, because in the past, this kind of strategy were not just considered, but at the same time, we did it in a fragmented way. So Italy decided one thing, France decided another thing, and Germany. So there is no coordination among the different fundings. And this is something that in the world of today is unacceptable, because we are really...
I have to stop you now. Thank you. It was very, very interesting, but I have to stop you because we have 15 minutes more for Q&A, so I wanted to take the opportunity. And I know that you all can talk about this topic for hours, but since we have our director, Daniel Gross, here, who has been working for the last month on semiconductors, I would invite him to open the Q&A with his comments. Especially on what he has listened, but also on his findings.
Thanks a lot. Very, let's say, intense discussion. I will resist the invitation to discuss about the Inflation Reduction Act. If people are interested, on our website, we have a piece where we show that's actually very much in European interests, because basically it creates a market in the US which is protected of Chinese or from Chinese competition. So we should send a thank you letter to Biden for that one. But let me put that aside. Give you one reflection which is based on a very recent experience, but which has implications for the CHIPS Act and the overall discussion here. I just had the occasion to participate in the annual meeting of the German Electronics Industry Association. And I asked around here, okay, now Intel has postponed and basically abandoned the project. If you abandon a project for 2 years in the chip sector, that's the next generation, right? And they said, we don't care. Intel would have come anyway with its own suppliers, right? One supplier would have been ASML. It would have been the first advanced machine of ASML in Europe. Which tells you a lot. ASML exports, I see the lady from Holland, 95%, 97% outside Europe, right? Because they produce these machines for very advanced logic chips, which basically you have probably all here in your smartphones. And how many smartphones are produced in Europe? 0, right? So, and so you would have had there a fab which uses ASML and then all the American suppliers which you mentioned also, and no ecosystem. What's the point? We have talked in Italy a lot about cathedrals in the desert, right? That's what it would have been. So I think the German government was lucky. They saved 10 billion. But which brings me to the larger question. Everybody seems to be focused about the hardware, the physical chips. Where's the chip being produced, right? When the value added of the chips is now more than 50% in the software. You mentioned en passant NVIDIA as a chip maker. NVIDIA doesn't produce any chips. They tell TSMC in Taiwan how to produce them, how to arrange the circuits. That's where the value added is increasingly. And that's where Europe is absent. I think that's where we should be looking for, right? And maybe some of the specialist suppliers you also mentioned in etching and so. This is the typical technology hardware technology where Europe might catch up. But it's the software where we should be looking at, and the software is also where the security risks lie, right? Because if you know how the circuits are, you can do something. If you just produce them with the latest advanced machinery, that doesn't create a security risk. And therefore, I would say the CHIPS Act really has a lot of damage. It gives member countries the leeway to subsidize hugely the hardware, the fabrics, the fabs, the factories which produce the physical chips, with very little value added in Europe. Instead of saying, okay, here we have a problem, which is on the design stage, on the software stage, Europe is basically absent. I can make publicity for another study which we did, where we showed that R&D expenditure on software in the US is 15 times higher than in Europe. And that's where the problem is, not in building a nice, shiny new factory. And that's, I think, what we should be discussing much more, not how to get the factories to Europe, but how to get the know-how. And that is not something where a government can say, psht, boom, please, it happens. You need to have good universities, technical schools, and all the ecosystem you need to have to grow that sector. And I think that's also where our national European security is in the future. So let's forget about the fabs. Let's concentrate on software.
Thank you, Daniel. This is not only a European debate, but Raghuram Rajan made some of the same objections that Daniel made about Germany, about India, because India is investing $14 billion to build fabs, and Raghuram Rajan said we need engineers and not chip makers to build a sustainable growth model. But this is open to discussion. So if you have questions, don't be shy, even if you want to ask what a semiconductor is. I mean, whatever. It's your chance to understand something. Please.
Thank you. In the geopolitical asset of chip manufacturing, ASML is a key company, sure. It's an European company, but it's not the only European company that's key in the value chain. There's, for example, Zeiss. It's a German company who produced the lens. There is Trumpf, who is a German company, again, who produces lasers. Without those two companies, German companies, it's impossible to produce very high quality chips. But nevertheless, we are not able, as a European Union, to leverage those role we have in the manufacturing, to have here the manufacturing. How is it possible?
If you follow, I mean, I don't want to answer, but if you follow the line of reasoning of Daniel, the problem is not if we should leverage in that, with that goal to have here the manufacturing, but maybe I can ask Sanne or Alessia if they want to answer. I mean, what, if I could rephrase slightly the question, what does it mean to leverage the key companies that we have here in Europe? What is the ultimate goal? I mean, what do we want to get in this race for technological supremacy? Because our friend here, he said we should leverage the fact that we have key companies to have more, basically more jobs here. What's your answer? Alessia, maybe you start.
Well, I think I agree with Daniel, because the smaller share of value added is in the middle of the chain. So the governance is either design or even the testing is very important, because it's very high tech. I mean, not everybody can test. Seems strange, but it is true. This is why I was very puzzled when even the Italian government was seeking for Chinese investment or whatever investment to increase production capacity to have more jobs. What for? So we want to control part of the value chain, not to have more jobs. They can go overnight to another country, as we know, happened several times. So even the Malaysian government is not seeking for jobs in the sector. Jobs, even the Indian government, it's not the sector creating the bulk of jobs today. But maybe the human capital behind that is much more, wiser. So this is my take on it. So the production part is not the best of it.
Sanne, we know how former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte leveraged the fact that he hosted ASML. After he complied with the US request, he was named NATO Secretary General. So he leveraged, in a way, ASML. When you say that we should leverage the strategic relevance of ASML, what do you mean? What is your optimal policy?
Good question. That might be the only thing that we leveraged out of it, indeed. When I was talking about leverage, I didn't mean within the semiconductor industry, but there are many disruptive technologies that we are lagging behind. And then I'm thinking about AI applications, for example. We're talking about the automated cars coming to us from China. But even the European brands, they work together with Chinese companies in China to develop these V2X communication software, because that is at the moment the place to be for these developments. And China also has access to resources that we need. I'm thinking now about gallium and germanium, for example. China was already saying that, okay, if you make it difficult for us to buy these machines, we will require licenses to export these natural resources. And these resources are needed for the chip industry, but also for our defense industry. So if at some point China will say you won't get them anymore, we will have a big problem. So I'm thinking about leveraging these machines, access to these machines, to this technology in a much broader field, not just semiconductors.
Very interesting. We have time for a couple of final questions. One is here. He was the first one to. Okay, doesn't matter, but. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Sorry, I arrived a bit late, so I hope I'm not missing a good part of the discussion. But I just would like to come back to the issue of security and defense, because it seems to me, especially after having read the book from Manlio Graziano on global disorder, that we're heading towards a clear confrontation between powers, and especially between the US and China, and Europe is kind of squeezed between the two. So unless Europe is going to be able to take over competence on security and defense, it seems that it's going to be quite difficult to survive, especially in the competition and the fight between these two. And so that's where, I don't know, I mean, if it is an opinion you share or not, but I would like to ask you what you think about it.
We take the other questions, and we have 2 more questions, and then we go for final comments.
Hello, thank you for the very insightful presentations. I'm a PhD student at the legal department here at Bocconi, and I'm doing my research on semiconductors. So it was really useful. I have a question concerning the governance of the CHIPS Act, irrespective to the US version of the CHIPS Act, which has a central governance, central funding, and then it's deployed in the different states. Whilst the EU model, it's more or less easing state aid with the first-of-a-kind notion and allowing member states to finance their own factories and fab and production facilities. Given that this was designed prior to the AI boom, and also reading Mario Draghi's latest report that asks for more financing towards quantum chips. Do you foresee that the model and the governance structure of the EU CHIPS Act has to be revised and improved in this more assertive and more competitive space? Thank you.
Do you expect that?
I think so.
You would suggest.
But it's hard with, not being able to change the treaties and the competencies of the EU.
That's a super interesting question. The final question over there.
Thank you. I will try to be real quick. I just figured out that the national interest can differ from a company's interest. So I foresee kind of 2 different risks. One is that the entire know-how and technology will move and relocate to another country because of the private interest. And the other one is, can be born a parallel market not out of control of national security, and so create a bigger problem about that? Is there some risk evaluation about that? How likely can it be? Thank you.
Okay. They're all interesting questions. Cesare, want to start with the comments?
One thing that I think that has to be said that kind of link up his question with the commenter from the Daniel is that exactly as he was saying, like Draghi is suggesting that we have to look forward. Not Daniel was saying the next thing the focus is going to be software, and has to be software. And Draghi was adding, I think the focus is not just about software. I think it's going to be about like the next generation of chips, the next generation of computing. Because now we are really on the frontier of like this technology in a sense, and it's important for Europe, especially that like is like behind in this race today, to trying to focus on what is the next step for the competition environment, and it's not going to be this kind of chips, because this kind of chips are very close to the physical borders. So we have to focus exactly in design, in process that like has to do with research, and the CHIPS Act, the European CHIPS Act, does that, but as many said, like is doing it in a too much fragmented way. Europe has been the best, as in a sense it also link up with what he was asking, when you have like German company and then working together with a Dutch firms, like because like there's a same type of value chain. And so when you have this kind of like vision that collectively aims towards like, and today this technology is really much in a situation in which you need this kind of approach that does not like about defending what existing, but like trying to like to think forward. And that's what it was also very prominent in the Draghi report. Like, this is not like the time to be neither complacent or too pessimistic, because the position in Europe, a new race is about to start. That's what I was trying to say, in a sense. A new race, a new kind of technology is about. Maybe in 10 years, maybe in 15, but it's not like, it's not this kind of like, kind of technology is not forever. So maybe we have to get ready for the new kind of like race instead of like try to get kind of like defensive on this race, or we are not losing, but definitely we are not winning.
I promise we will organize another discussion to try to understand what a quantum computer is, because I cannot say it yet. But Roberto, do you think that the CHIPS Act is still fit for the job now that we have the AI race? Because as our friend here, who is much more expert than me and probably than us, he was saying the design of the CHIPS Act was basically aimed to let the national government to support, as you said, fabs in Sicily, rather than to compete with OpenAI. So do you think we need to change something?
Absolutely.
Or something is going to change?
Absolutely. I don't know if something is going to change. I don't think that this will happen easily after the European election. But definitely we have to do something, because I mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, and this is a very centralized approach. So the approach that we have right now in Europe is actually, as it has been said, devoted to the single country without coordination, and this will not result in any, I mean, maybe in some good result, but it will not change our situation from over-dependency and to bring Europe into at least an interdependent state inside the supply chain. And I'm very scared because when you talk about the software, unfortunately, I don't see any cloud provider from Europe. I don't see any AI big tech coming in Europe. So that's why I am really, worried for the fact that we are really, let's say, increasing the distance between us and Europe and US and China. So something has to be done.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Alessia, to you, the final comment. If I understood correctly the question, if we decouple the business perspective from national security approaches, maybe we get to a even more worrying scenario where the reason of the return of investment prevails on strategic and geopolitical consideration. Do you see this risk, or this supply chain in this industry are so interlinked with the politics and with the national security issues that it's impossible to decouple?
Well, maybe I'm too simple-minded, but I don't see a way to decouple in the sector. At the moment, there's no way to decouple, because, as was said very clearly before, the value chain is intertwined in a way so that nobody can do A to Z. Nobody, not even the US, because rare earths are mostly in China. So even if we had all the technology, but not the natural resources, and we decided not to export to China, say, well, extreme scenario, then China would say, okay, I'm not exporting the natural resources you need for that. So there's no way to decouple. So My point is, let's not imagine that decoupling is a possibility. Let's start by accepting that the decoupling in the sector is not possible today, and maybe even, I mean, never. Let's start from accepting this. Maybe there may be, more useful insights on how to avoid the geopolitical frictions or even more, dangerous scenarios. I would start from that point. Not a happy one, but more realistic.
Okay, thank you so much. I think it's a good point to end, because I mean, if we are worried from this kind of globalization, and that we understood after COVID that global supply chain are also problematic, we don't know the counterfactual. So we don't know if a more fragmented and less integrated world is a more secure world. Probably we are going to discover it, but I totally agree with Alessia that we also need to be realistic of what we can do, and maybe ask also if it is in our interest trying to have a less globalized world. We don't know how it will look like, but we are probably going to find out. Okay, let me join in thanking our speakers, Cesare Alemanni, Roberto Baldoni, Alessia Meghini, and Sanne van der Lugte. She has disappeared probably because she had a personal issue now. But I thank you all, and we have the final event of this series. No, not final. We have 2 more events in this series. One is particularly interesting, hopefully so, because it will be one day after the US presidential election. So we will unpack the consequences for the European Union. I think one day, I don't remember exactly, but close. You will find the program over there. And then we will have a final event in December to discuss the geopolitical implication of climate change and of the International Conference of Parties to discuss how to curb it. Okay, thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the evening. And thank you also to Egea for hosting us.